Right, I think we're ready to get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Carr, and I'm the Director of Fundraising and Marketing at Focus Island. Welcome to our October Women's Philanthropy Circle panel. I'm delighted to be joined by three wonderful guests this morning. First, we have Teresa Purtill, Director of Field and Customer Operations at Boardroom Energy. We have Louise Bayliss, who's our Campaigns Coordinator at Focus Island, and Scott Buckley, who's an ambassador for our Lived Experience Ambassador Programme at Focus Island. I'd like to thank Ian Dicker, Abby Kelly-Gorman and Ashley Nolan from our Partnership and Philanthropy team for organising this event. And thank you all once again for coming together to support vulnerable young people. As you know, your support makes it possible for young people who are at risk of homelessness to find safe and secure futures. You're helping them on the first steps that they take to live independently. For anyone attending who is not a member, I hope that today's talk will inspire you to join us. This amazing group of women philanthropists support Focus Island by helping to extend our networks, identifying new opportunities for us, but most importantly, they help change the lives of young people across the country every year. Members make a monthly donation of €100, which is then pulled together to make a real change and have a deeper impact on the lives of the people we support. We've used funds raised from this group of women to pilot new programs such as youth mediation. Youth mediation aims to keep young people in their family home, avoiding homelessness, and was so successful in its first year that TUSLA paid for a second mediator to join the team in its second. The Circle also supports young people in our existing services, such as aftercare, which helps young people leaving state care at the age of 18 at a point in their lives where they may be particularly susceptible to homelessness, and it helps them make that transition to independent living. It's also supported our Preparation for Education, Training and Employment programme, which we call PEAT, which empowers young people to develop the tools and ultimately gain employment so that they can maintain their tenancy. I hope today you get a glimpse into how your support can make a real and lasting difference in young people's lives. I'm delighted to say that today you'll be able to hear from one of those young people who has benefited from the support of the Women's Philanthropy Circle. Scott Buckley successfully engaged with our PEAT programme, that's Preparation for Education, Training and Employment, and is now part of our recently launched Lived Experience Ambassador Programme, or LEAP as you will hear us referring to it this morning. We love a good acronym in Focus Island. This pilot programme was made possible by Boardroom Energy, helping people who have experienced homelessness tell their stories. As an organisation, we hope this programme will help potential supporters, policymakers and the public gain a better understanding of the challenges faced by people experiencing homelessness. I expect to be seeing a lot more of Scott and his fellow LEAP ambassadors over the coming months. As Boardroom Energy is supporting the LEAP programme, I'm delighted to be joined today by Teresa Purtill, who is the Director of Field and Customer Operations. Teresa is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, and Teresa's passionate about driving change in large organisations and motivating people to take on new challenges. She's put her skills to work not just in successfully leading large-scale transformation programmes, but also taking a lead on corporate philanthropy, as well as diversity and inclusion initiatives. This includes taking part in several Focus Island events, such as Shine a Light Night, most recently of which I think Teresa took part on this Friday, and by being an ambassador for neurodiversity within Boardroom Energy. It is fitting that Teresa is our guest speaker, as her work highlights the benefits of corporate partnership and the valuable relationships these partnerships forge between the business and the charity sector. It is opportunities like this which grow networks of like-minded people that are at the core of Women's Philanthropy Circle. Teresa's leadership is a glowing example of the difference everyone can make for vulnerable young people supported by Focus Island. Her story is a powerful example of how leadership in philanthropy can have a far-reaching impact. Today, Teresa will share some of her invaluable lessons in leadership that she's learned along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Teresa. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the warm introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to join you today. And, you know, it's actually 6 months since I was asked if I would join the Women's Philanthropy Circle as a keynote speaker. And I read an email the other day which had explained at the time that your most recent speakers had been, in fact, Sister Stan herself and former President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, who joined you for International Women's Day. And there was a kind invitation to join you for your following session, which I think was in April, where I could listen to Sonia Deasy, founder and CEO of award-winning skincare line Pestle & Mortar, share her story. And so I did. And what stands out for me that day as I listened to Sonia tell her inspirational story were two things. The first one was my initial reaction. And I think as anyone who's had the opportunity to listen to Sonia will know that, you know, her journey's been amazing. But perhaps an all too familiar female trait was a little inner voice I could hear saying, my gosh, how can I possibly follow that story? I haven't created an award-winning product selling in 21 countries on 3 continents. So, you know, what will I share? But my second reaction, and what registers most and is most important, is what answered the first question I'd asked myself. And it was this: what she shared that day was powerful, but not for the reasons I've just described. What had been so impactful was the story's simplicity, because in sharing it, Sonia had been clear in her purpose. She'd focused on her message. She spoke about her core values. And she reminded me of a simple mantra that I think perhaps I'd temporarily forgotten. And that is, unless you're really willing to stand a little closer to the edge of a cliff and face into something that perhaps you yourself find really daunting, then are you really seizing every opportunity presented to you to grow and learn? You know, each and every one of us has a story inside that is personal, it's unique, and it's authentic. And what matters most is being true to your story and getting to share it. So really, I'd like to thank Focus Ireland for giving me this opportunity this morning. And I think for the next 20 minutes or so, just nudging me a little closer to that edge. I'm going to speak about 3 things this morning. I'd like to talk first a little bit about myself and my own professional journey thus far. I'll talk about the partnership between Bord Gáis Energy and Focus Ireland and what that partnership means for us. And finally, as you described, Amy, in your introduction, I'll share my thoughts on a cause that is equally close to my heart. I know that all of you, as members of the Philanthropy Circle, believe that each and every one of us can make a significant difference and to the wider lasting differences in society. And I'm privileged to be the executive sponsor of Bord Gáis Energy's Neurodiversity Network. So I want to share my thoughts on why inclusion of such a diverse cognitive abilities in companies is so important. Not only can it facilitate employment for a group in society that is severely underrepresented in the workforce, but it can also deeply benefit and enrich the thinking and success of the organisations that hire them. So first things first, as Amy said, I'm Teresa Purtill. I consider myself a native Limerick woman, living in Dublin for the past 26 years. I'm married, and I'm a proud mother of 3. My daughter Chloe turns 26 next month, and my 2 sons, Patrick and Rory, are aged 11 and 9. I had my daughter when I was 23 going on 24, so you can probably work out relatively easy that I can boast having had my children, one in my 20s, one in my 30s, and my last child after I turned 40. I was born in London, the youngest of 4 children. And although my mum is British, my late father hailed from East Clare. And on my 2nd birthday, we moved back to Limerick City, where I was raised. And I believe, you know, I had an appreciation for the true meaning of diversity from quite a young age in the 1970s. I grew up in a house that was at times quite divided by what we would refer to as the Troubles. I have a softly spoken, reserved English mother who also supports the Conservatives, and a father who was a real passionate member of his local Fianna Fáil Cumann. Now, I recognise that such an upbringing probably deprived me of any real strong sense of a national identity, But it did equip me with a desire to always argue the case for the other side, be ever willing to see other people's perspectives, and when necessary, be vocal in my fight for the underdog, even if it wasn't the most popular option. Throughout my childhood, I equally had been very, very conscious of families that surrounded us as I grew up, those who were successful in either business or politics. The late, great Desi O'Malley, who founded the PDs, and his family were our neighbours, as was another great political figure of the time, that was Labour's Jim Kemmy. But both were proud Limerick men, never afraid to stick to their beliefs and hold to their values, and willingly face the consequences. My college years were also in Limerick. My primary degree was in languages and humanities. I then completed a master's in European integration, and I'd always been passionate about French, about history and social change. And at that time, I really wanted to lecture in university. So in 1995, my grand plan had been to take the thesis I'd just written, which was on right-wing extremism and how it could pose a threat to European unity. And I wanted to convert that to a PhD. Now, enter my daughter Chloe into the world. So I quickly put that thought behind me, and I made the decision to move to Dublin with my now husband, Paddy, who was taking up his first employment as an engineer. You know, from a professional perspective, my mid-20s probably are best described by the word frustrated. There was a recognition that my peers were becoming something, mainly accountants and lawyers in London. And that childhood awareness of the differences between groups in society made me really determined that I would strive to achieve my potential and not in any way be impeded by an early experience of motherhood. And for many at the time, you know, American multinational companies were establishing in Ireland, and they were ideal opportunities for graduates. So that's where I started. My first role was speaking French in both sales, service, and technical support roles for both Xerox and the Hertz Corporation. And the pace of those environments was really exciting. I worked in both companies on migrating services from their local domestic markets to set up operations in Dublin. And that's where my love of continuous improvement was born, process excellence, and really understanding how to drive change. I was incredibly ambitious. 10 years after the Dublin operation was set up, I became its first female director in 2005. And I later went on to become the global vice president of Hertz's customer care organization, where I managed 15 sites globally from 2012. But those years were very intense. Hertz was sold to a private equity consortium in about 2006. And that was, as you're all aware, followed quickly by the financial crisis in 2008. So as with many companies at the time, you know, there was significant pressure to reduce operating expense, but still prove that we could grow whilst we faced disruption. And I had developed a very keen interest in Lean Six Sigma. And in 2009, I was offered the opportunity to take on a new role, to be trained by McKinsey and to lead at first with their support, a global transformation program. Now, despite being pregnant with my first son, I was absolutely thrilled with that role. You know, I recall having an honest and open discussion with my boss, who was a really great sponsor of mine. And he firmly espoused the belief that women should not have to choose between a career opportunity of a lifetime or going on maternity leave. And that despite the timing, you know, my appointment was absolutely the right choice for the company. I contrasted it at the time with some words of advice that I was receiving from close female colleagues. And I'll never forget the one who warned me that, you know, women can't get an A in everything. You know, a position to which I answered, well, why not? Now, an invaluable lesson I learned throughout those tumultuous years was what a coach of mine had described to me as the value of your personal boardroom. She believed that each and every one of us needs a personal boardroom made up of about 12 roles, all of whom play a part in your success. Now, I mentioned one already, that's your sponsor. A sponsor endorses your ideas and your views and connects you with senior or influential people. But there are other roles. They're your connectors who connect you. They're the experts you look to. They're challengers. but it also includes an anchor. And an anchor is an invaluable role that holds you to account for the balance between work and the rest of your life. My decision to leave Hertz in 2015 was partly fueled by that need to anchor and find the right balance. You know, by the time I joined Bord Gáis in August 2015, the previous 4 years had seen me take up that role as global vice president, all the while having had my 2 youngest sons. And as a family, we'd already made the decision that my husband would become a stay-at-home dad in 2012, but my time was being spent increasingly in North America. And I just feel the personal investment in my role was coming at a price that I wasn't sure I was any longer willing to pay. So when I joined Bord Gáis, I really was motivated to join a strong Irish brand and learn about business in Ireland. So joining the leadership team and having the opportunity to influence and help shape customer experience strategies, it really was a strong motivating factor. And at the time, I really welcomed the opportunity for moving away from a large global multinational company to be part of a company that, although still part of an international group, was very much independent, smaller, and a warmer organisation. It was, however, on my very first day in Bord Gáis in August 2015 that I witnessed at first hand the power of the positive impact that our partnership with Focus Ireland has on our employees. Earlier that year, our employees had been asked to choose what cause mattered most to them, and they'd all chosen homelessness. Now, we host an annual company-wide event called Momentum, and it had been decided prior to me joining that on that day, which was August 27th, the Focus Ireland Bord Gáis partnership would be formally launched to the company. Now, I could see at firsthand just how meaningful this was and how the culture of charity existed within Bord Gáis. Since then, we've concentrated not only on support, but also on prevention, helping vulnerable families before they get to that point. Over the 6 years, we've supported over 7,000 families, that's 12,000 adults and children, and directly prevented 458 families from becoming homelessness. BG support has also enabled Focus to fund advice and information staff at its 5 centres. Now, I'm sure many of you here on the call today are veterans of the flagship event, Shine a Light Night. So this was our 3rd year formally sponsoring that event, and we know it's been such a great success. But what's special about our partnership is how it energises and galvanises our employees behind a cause that they're most passionate about. Be it the annual Christmas party at Croke Park, where in 2019, 74 families had an opportunity just to spend, just have a little taste of Christmas for one afternoon. Obviously, we've adapted throughout COVID, and in last year, instead, it was a gift bag to 320 families. But we've got behind Christmas FM telethons, sports days for Focus clients. Our team of service engineers do fundraisers for Easter egg drives. And for the really physical amongst us, we've had successful office-to-office cycles, which is 260 kilometres between our Cork and Dublin office. Personally, I'm a firm believer that what you get back reflects what you're really willing and how much you're willing to give. So there is one standout event that I want to share with you today. And that is in 2019, we decided to change from our summer event, from our annual office-to-office cycle to climbing the 4 peaks. And that was our summer fundraiser. The plan being to climb each of the highest 4 peaks in Ireland within 2.5 days. Now, hiking is something that's close to my heart. I love hiking with my family, and I often lead the hiking event in the company's wellbeing calendar. So something told me that it was the right fit. Well, over those 3 days, we climbed 3,400 meters, we hiked 60 kilometers, and we spent 18 hours on buses driving 1,242 kilometers between climbs. But I faced a lifelong fear, as the sharp descents of all of those summits were personally far more frightening to me than the prospects of actually climbing them in the first place. The climb is physical, but the descent for me was going to be an emotional and mental hurdle. And it's one I could never have made without the support of really selfless colleagues. Even in the training and the build up to the event, I could tell that my physical fitness was definitely enough to manage any one of the climbs in isolation. 4 in 3 days was an unknown matter. And I learned quite quickly that we had fitter and younger colleagues on board, and so that leadership is not always from the front. Leadership does have a place in letting others go forth and lead the way. And when reflecting on this, I came across a lovely quote the other day from Nelson Mandela, who said, "It's better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory. You can take the front line in times of danger. That's when people appreciate leadership." Now, I also learned the value of showing my vulnerability. I'd been so focused on that first climb in Carreg Tuathal, and achieving that summit was exhilarating. But I think I only lasted 45 minutes into the descent before I sat and cried for the first time. Day 2, we climbed the boggy terrain of Muilray and Mayo, which was energy sapping. I had a tight hamstring, which reminded me it was there every step I took. And a group of us soon realized that if we were to manage that climb that second day, we were going to have to go at a slower pace than the rest of the pack. If we tried to keep up with others, we would have failed to complete it. I think it's a lesson we all must stare into at some stage in our lives. And what concerned me at the end of day 2 was that day 3 involved 2 peaks. And to do them, we not only had to get off Slieve Donard very quickly to get on the bus and make it down to Lugnaquilla, but we would be joined there by another 40 colleagues. There were 35 of us on the original climb who were going to help us do the last leg. There was really only one option for me and for that small group. So our 8 of us set out the next day at around 6 a.m, an hour before everybody else, giving ourselves a 1-hour advantage to be able to go at our pace, but clearly not hold back others. By the time we made it down Donard, my knees were so inflamed. I think the fear and the tension in my legs, as I was so cautious coming down, meant that for the 3rd time in 3 days, I cried. And I think for the 3rd time in 3 days, there was somebody in our group who was willing to hold my hand as we made it down. But the round of applause from 40 colleagues waiting for us as we arrived at Lugnaquilla was just so special. And together, 80 of us made that final climb. We raised over 30,000 for Focus Ireland doing the 4 peaks that summer. But I got so much more from that experience. I learned that in showing your vulnerability, you can actually prove your strength. In Bord Gáis, we're also really passionate about D&I, our D&I agenda. We really do want to create a truly inclusive place, a workplace that reflects the world we live in, and one where people can all succeed. So as a team, we sat down at the beginning of this year and we discussed what goals we would set for ourselves. And I knew straight away that the cause I wanted to support was that of neurodiversity. Now, neurodiversity is a relatively new term. It was first coined in the 1990s by an Australian sociologist called Judy Singer, and it refers to people who have dyslexia, autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, amongst other neurological conditions. And they're called spectrum because obviously there's a wide range of characteristics, but fundamentally share some common features. It's just simply how people process information and how they learn. Now, the expression was first used to challenge the stigma that actually considers these cognitive conditions to be intellectual disabilities. Instead, it forms the view that people who've been formally diagnosed with any of these conditions are simply different to the neurotypical. In other words, it points to something we all know, that just some of us are just simply wired differently. Both my sons, Patrick and Rory, have autism. My youngest does other challenges also, and both were diagnosed prior to starting national school and have had the support of SNAs and resource teachers. But I've seen it firsthand how really small accommodations in the school environment can make such a massive difference. With the right support, I can see how they may reach their own potential and actually thrive. However, the statistics sadly indicate otherwise. It's estimated that 4% of the population in Ireland are neurodiverse and 1.5% are on the autism spectrum. But the levels of diagnosis that I'm aware of within the national school setting and what I see, I personally believe that these figures are grossly misunderestimated and reflect the fact that so many of us as children, as we grew up, there were children that surrounded us that were misunderstood, undetected, and often marginalised. Each year in Ireland, about 1,500 people qualify from a 3rd level education who are classified as neurodiverse. many have STEM qualifications, but 85% of those on the autism spectrum are either under or unemployed in Ireland. Now, the total lifetime cost for the government for an unemployed person of intellectual disability is estimated to be about €1 million per individual. So how ironic is it that a subset of the population, often blessed with really unique talents, can find themselves excluded? Studies also show that people with ASD typically have greater job retention, greater precision and accuracy, strong attention to detail, and a work ethic that results in significantly reduced levels of absenteeism compared to the neurotypical. And for many, the barriers that they face is just a simple general lack of awareness and understanding. This has led to hiring processes and workspaces and management practices being designed with only the neurotypical in mind. It's also been proven that the accommodations necessary for a more neurodiverse workforce are actually quite simple and that they cost little to nothing. Some of the obstacles, obviously the first one is recruitment, but once that's overcome, the principal needs of the neurodiverse to flourish have been described as clarity and directness of communication, flexibility in terms of hours or movement breaks, use of ear defenders in certain noisy environments, how you position your desk, and regular management support. But if companies are only beginning to recognise neurodiversity as a concept now, then we have a considerable task ahead of us to move beyond simple awareness and acceptance towards a greater appreciation of cognitive diversity. In March of this year, I spoke at our company's town hall on my passion for neurodiversity on the D&I agenda, and I shared this story. I recall the evening that my son Patrick had come home from school, upset and confused that 3 of his children had told him he was autistic. Now, we never told Patrick that he had a label. We supported him, but we never used those words. We sat that night and we talked about what it meant, and we helped him make some sense of it. But the following evening, when I came home from work, Patrick was waiting for me at the door, and in his little hand, he clutched a piece of paper that he was excited to share with me. He'd spent his afternoon researching, and on the paper was a long list. It included a long list of names. They were Charles Darwin, Sir Isaac Newton, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Nikola Tesla, just to mention a few. And as he finished reading that list, he looked up proudly and said, "You know, Mum, I'm going to be CEO of a company one day, and I'll be proud to say I've autism." Now, unlike many others, Patrick is also blessed with a deep, deep well of self-belief. Since then, we've established our neurodiversity network in Bourgogne. We now have 8 colleagues who have come together to drive the agenda, and we're all motivated by a personal connection, a brother, a child, a nephew, or a diagnosis themselves. And we've started the conversation. We're only at the beginning of our journey, but we are raising awareness. And we see opportunities at every stage of the employee life cycle, starting with how you recruit, to change how and what we do, to no longer build processes and practices around the neurotypical, but to really embrace diversity and inclusion and to tap into a pool of diverse talent and individual thinking. You know, we all know that young people can become vulnerable to homelessness for a variety of reasons. We know it's usually complex, and we know it's usually a consequence of a combination of interconnected circumstances. Now, the relationship between unemployment and homelessness is clear, but so in fact is the connection between neurodiversity and unemployment. But we have the power as business leaders to help drive the change that we know will make all the difference. In my mid-20s, my energy and drive was on seizing opportunities to fulfill my own potential. And as I approach a very significant milestone birthday in the coming weeks, I understand that the power of leadership is in being able to create a platform for others to thrive. And our greatest legacy is to positively impact the lives of others. I'd like to think that raising awareness at events such as these can really help drive that. So thank you so much, Amy, Aisling, and all the team at Focus Ireland and the Philanthropy Circle for giving me this opportunity to share my story with you today and to stand just a little closer to the edge of my cliff. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. I mean, that was hugely interesting and very, very moving. I'm sure there'll be a huge amount of questions for you, and we will have time for them as we come to the end of the session. I mean, I think, you know, we're talking around identity, diversity, leadership. It's so kind of interesting to be doing this as part of this circle as well. So thank you for sharing with us. And just a reminder, if you have questions for Teresa, if you want to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and I will pose them to Teresa as we come to the end of the session. I'm going to move on now to introduce you firstly to Louise Bayliss, who is our campaign coordinator here at Focus Island. Louise has worked with Focus Island for the last 3 years, first in housing support before moving into her current role in the advocacy team. Louise has carried out tremendous work on the LEAP campaign, so that's our lived experience ambassador programme. She's coordinated our organisation to deliver training and coaching for our ambassadors, and it's wonderful to see how they are now empowered to tell their own stories. Now Louise is part of the team promoting this programme and seizing opportunities to help our LEAP ambassadors share their stories. Our ambassadors all have lived experience of homelessness, and they can offer their knowledge they've gained through this lived experience to support our advocacy, communications, research and fundraising work. Our ambassadors will become an integral part of our advocacy work, and our aim is really to change the public perception of homelessness. The impact of our LEAP ambassadors will be broad. They will inform our supporters, sway public opinion and influence policy affecting people experiencing homelessness. It's a really kind of new programme, very innovative. Louise is joined by one of our LEAP ambassadors today, Scott, and Scott's going to share his experience of homelessness and how, with the support of our PEAT programme, he was able to exit homelessness. This help is only possible because of amazing supporters like you, like the Women's Philanthropy Circle. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Louise and Scott. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you for everybody for attending today. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to explain in detail what the LEAP programme is. So the LEAP programme is, as Amy explained, a very innovative programme where we're trying to change both internally and externally the perception of homelessness in Ireland. So internally, what we're hoping is that the work we do with our ambassadors will help inform both our advocacy work and our services work, and really going back to the original vision of Sister Stan, that we will be working with people with homelessness rather than for people. And we're doing what they want us to do rather than deciding what we think they should want us to do. So that's going to be a really integral part of the work we're doing. The external work is equally as important. The external work will be to change public perception of what homelessness is. When you Google homelessness, and you can all try it this evening if you want. When you Google homelessness and you put in the image bar, what you'll see are rough sleepers. You'll see people sleeping in tents. You'll see people sleeping in sleeping bags. You'll see the harsh end of rough sleeping. That's not what homelessness is. Homelessness is being without a home. And if you believe, and the reason why we think it's so important to change that, if you believe that rough sleeping is the problem, then the solution would be to build more shelters. And that's what has gone on. And what we're saying is, and what's the heart of Focus Ireland is, homelessness ends when people have homes, when people have security, when people know where they're sleeping. And when people have that security, they can plan for the rest of their lives, look for jobs, contribute to society, and be active members of society. So that's one of the aims of the LEAP project. And we have done an awful lot of work in the LEAP project, and the ambassadors have worked really hard. We did 10 weeks of training, of weekly workshops. We did intensive training on diversity, inclusion, equality. We had Sinead Gibney, who's the Chief Commissioner of IREC, came and facilitated a workshop on equality. And we did all this social media training, communications, and more importantly, we hired a writer, Jeff Power, who literally sat with, did workshops with all the ambassadors, and then one-to-one work with each ambassador on how they would narrate their story in a way that was true and honored their experience. Because one of the things we didn't want to do, and we were very clear that we didn't want to do, was to use their stories, their pain, to exploit it, to have a few likes on Facebook, or to get a few extra bob in fundraising. That's not what this is about. We don't want their stories to be voyeuristic. We want their stories to move people, to change their perception, and to understand where they're coming from. So hiring the right age of power was really important, and we can see the difference in how they started working, how they started telling their stories, and now how they own their stories, and how they share what they're comfortable with sharing and not doing further than they want to do. So we've been making videos, and at this stage, I'd like to share one of the videos that we made with our ambassador. Just before I do that, I just would like to congratulate our 5 ambassadors for completing the workshop. Our 5 ambassadors are Stephanie Clark, Scott Buckley, Catherine Keenan, Paul Gagan, and Kelly Byrne. All 5 fabulous people. And now I think we're going to have an opportunity to share with Paul's video. And I hope you can see the message we're trying to get through, which is totally honoring their story. And something Teresa said there, which I thought was really powerful, was when she mentioned that through pain, through your pain and your vulnerability, you show real strength. And what I think is our ambassadors, by sharing their painful periods in life to empower others, have shown that leadership that Teresa quite articulately expressed. So if we have a look now at the video.
How you doing? I'm Paul. I've been living in Focus accommodation for almost 7 years now. I grew up in Ballymun. I was born in city centre, and my parents moved out to Ballymun when I was born, into the flats out there. I had a good upbringing, very supportive family, and growing up in Ballymun. Well, it was the dance scene in the 90s, and you know, the rave scene came out, and you know, it was all speed and coke and ecstasy, and you know, everyone was doing it. It was the thing to do. A couple of years down the road, she was expecting on the first child, and we were still doing what we were doing, you know, and then progressing again into other stuff. Heroin was kind of easy accepted in the dance scene, you know, as the come down off the buzz, and I got into smoking heroin and eventually injecting. Yeah, we were delighted that she was expecting, and you know, but we were still caught up in what we were caught up in. You know, my son, he was born premature, and we didn't find out till he was 3 months old that he had a severe disability. And you know, yeah, it was difficult. We had a lot of appointments with physios and occupational therapists and doctor's appointments, hospital appointments, but we did what was asked. It was when I ended up in hospital in 2010. That support wasn't there, and I realised why. You know, that I was hurting them so much in my addiction, and you were probably only waiting for a phone call to hear the worst news, you know. But I didn't realise what I was doing to them. It was all about me. I had a bad ulcer on my leg, and the infection was very bad in it, and a doctor came in and he wanted to amputate the leg, and I said, no, like, you can't. Like, and he says, well, you're not going to change in your lifestyle, you know, you end up back here, it's going to come off you, or the infection's going to travel up through you and kill you. So, you know, that was kind of a wake-up call. You know, with my son having a disability, you know, what good am I to him or my family with an amputated leg? It was a good opportunity to change, you know. It gave me time to think in the hospital. There's nothing left for you now, only to die. So it was time for it to change, you know. It was either die or change. And it took over 2 years to kind of get from a high dose of methadone and prescribed medication to drug-free. I had to register as homeless, you know. I had to mind myself as well, you know what I mean, because it was a recovery house a lot of the time, but not all of the time. I changed everything about my past, you know, I had to. I couldn't go back to that life. I have a very good life now. I'm currently a project worker in homeless services. And My goal now, next goal, is to be social care worker. 9 years ago, someone said to me, you get a day clean, I wouldn't have believed them. And something we love, you know, is helping someone or giving back to somebody, you know, or just letting them know there's a way out of this.
So that was Paul's story, and I think what you can see from that is sometimes people just need a bit of support, and with that support they can make their way out of things, and people can suffer trauma. I now have the great pleasure of introducing Scott Buckley. Scott is a 27-year-old young man. I'm just going to try to show him a bit closer. And he has availed of Focus Ireland services numerous times. So Scott's story is when he was 7, he started his time in residential care. And from the ages of 7 to 14, he went in and out of residential care. Then at the age of 14, his mother died, and his brother, who was an adult, took him in to his own home that he shared with his partner. Scott lived very happily with his brother for 2 years until, unfortunately, at the age of 16, his brother died suddenly. His brother's partner, Michelle, was a lovely lady, and Scott continued to live with her till he was 18. And then, like many 18-year-olds, he wanted his own independence, and he moved at 18 into Cade Cane, which I know the Women's Philanthropy Circle has supported too. And in Cade Cane, he started living independently, going to college, learning about his art, and starting the path to adulthood. He finished college, he moved out into rented accommodation. As many people found rented accommodation, the private rental sector was not kind to him. He ended up couch surfing, visiting friends, and being without a home. During this time, he developed serious panic attacks, serious psoriasis, had physical manifestations of all the stress he was under. He was referred to our PEAT service, which was mentioned earlier. And during PEAT, he got help with the CV, interview training techniques, and got a job as a mediator in the Science Gallery in Trinity College, which he really loved. He then had a short period as a care assistant, and now is working in Pennies. He has his full-time job. He has his job in Pennies. He has his own apartment, and he has his love of art, which I'm going to invite Scott to come over and take over, and he's going to explain what he gets out of art and why he loves it so much. And we've compiled a small presentation of his artwork so that you can see that we see one face of homelessness, but behind it, people have their own talents and diversity. And just because you don't measure up in one quantum, you can measure up in some other ways, which I think I'm in awe of Scott's artwork, but I'll let you be your own judge. So Scott, do you want to come over?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
So basically, I started arts when I was about 14. I kind of got into it then. And basically, when I left school at 18, I went to college, and I did a portfolio preparation for 2 years, which was really good. It was really, really good. And it gave me a good insight on, obviously the history of arts, what to do with mixed media. So I found that fascinating anyway. So basically then, I started to get a bit more recognition with, as been told to do portraits for people. So I did a painting there a while back for Focus Ireland. It was just I found it to be a very simple painting of a board flying. But then the people from Cade Cane in Focus Ireland found it to be really good. So they put it on the Christmas cards. They printed it out on a Christmas card. And basically, it was an open day for Focus Ireland, which President Michael D. Higgins came over. So we got to see the card. He signed it, which was really cool. It was nerve-wracking. So yeah, basically, I wanted to just kind of keep doing it, you know, keep doing the arts. And obviously with moving a lot, it was a bit nerve-wracking, but I think, yeah, I don't know, I think when I kept doing the art, it was something that I could fall back on for my own mental health. You know, it kept me relaxed and it kept me motivated to do it. So it was pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, and I just keep doing it now. Like I do commission works and a bit of bits and bobs here and there. I do find it annoying now because I'm working. I don't get that much time to do it, and the hours are kind of all over the place. But yeah, I think it's something. I think in the future I'd like to take it more serious. You know, to do it every single day. So yeah. So then this painting. Yeah, this painting is. It's one of a galaxy. I think at the time I wasn't thinking of what I was doing. Something just like popped in the head. What's it? I wanted it. I think the doorway that came out of nowhere. That just, you know, I wanted it actually. I think I wanted it to make it look like a mural on somebody's wall, but then it, you know, something just more. I don't know. It's something more mysterious. With this drawing, yeah, it's basically what I did was it was black sugar paper, so I just drew it there. But then I said to myself, right, I want to take that a little bit further, so I did the triangle, sorry, and then I did the reflection of there walking on water, just to give it that real, yeah, good effect. And the butterfly and the rose. Yeah, it was just I just wanted something simple, and with a little tiny bit. You notice at the background there's a bit of like a dusty sort of effect. I just gave that for a dramatic effect. It's cool. That one, yeah, that one is actually I was coming up with a title for that one. I didn't know what sort of title, but yeah, that was just basically a little experiment of somebody holding their face, but I think there was a sheet, like there's a sheet over their face, so it probably just represents, you know, people not wanting to be seen. I think I'm one of them. I'm very a shy person, so it's probably just that. Yeah, that one is basically a part of a collection. I would say, yeah, a number of drawings I did called frame. So obviously just a black little simple frame, and then you have a famous person in the frame. So that's Johnny Depp. Sleepy Hollow. Not Sleepy Hollow. What movie is that one? Edward Scissorhands, yeah. And that one was during the pandemic. Yeah, it's the 2020 kids. I wanted something funny, but I think it's actually kind of scary because I don't know. Hopefully now, within a few years' time, we won't have to wear masks. If we do, that's what it's going to be like, though. And this one's a little sort of Halloween theme that I'm coming up with. And basically, the title Marksman is basically another name for trickster or storyteller. So I wanted to come up with something slightly creepy and eerie. So that's how I came up with that face of the man holding a torch, basically, and the light is shining up. And this one is basically another mini series of Christmas paintings I did. Just little bits and bobs. I was trying to actually sell these ones off, but nobody wanted to buy them. So what I did was I went to the Children's Hospital in Temple Street, and I gave them all to the kids because nobody was buying them, and I didn't. So I felt it was a bit me just to keep them all there. So I let the kids have the children. So yeah, basically, if you'd like to look at more artwork on my Instagram accounts, it's there for you to see. So it's up to you. So yeah, that's basically it. I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm nerve-wracking, or whatever. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm getting messages through from the panelists saying how fantastic your artwork is. Well done, great to see your paintings. I think we all agree you're so talented. So thank you for sharing those with us today. And we will share your Instagram account with people when we follow up after, so people can go on and keep checking out your artwork. If it's okay, I might move to the Q&A section if that's all right. And I can see that there's questions coming through for everybody. But I am going to start at the one that I've just seen come through. So this one's for you, Scott. What's your big dream, and will we see you in the National Gallery in a few years?
I think when I die.
Yeah. Would you? I mean, I know that you love the art. Is it something that you hope to do full time at some point?
It is something I was thinking of doing seriously, because I mean, there is artists out there that literally, from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, it's just drawing, painting, sculpting, and that's their life. I think it's a big commitment, and obviously I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So I'll see what's happening. I'll see what happens. Great.
I have a question here for Teresa from Maeve, and Maeve says, first, thank you for the inspiring and fascinating talk with some great observations on the impact of good leadership and the benefits of acknowledging vulnerability. Regarding neurodiversity in the workplace, what do you think is the main thing an organisation can do to attract and retain a more neurodiverse team, and to what extent is visibility and awareness key to success?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot in that question, and there's a couple of key words I'll pick out. And the first one asked by Maeve was, what can companies do to attract? And one of the things we've discussed as a team is how off-putting actually most job descriptions, most ads, most advertisements for recruitment actually are. So we're going to undertake rewriting all our job descriptions and how we advertise for roles, as we realise that very often a characteristic is a literal interpretation with neurodiversity, and the words we put on paper can very often exclude people before they've even had a chance to pick up the pen and think about applying. We talk about competencies such as being great team players. We really need to challenge ourselves about the words we put on paper, because we don't all have to be team players. We can actually be individual contributors with a hell of a lot to give. So it starts at the very, very beginning in terms of attraction, and that is how are we advertising? What do we really need? And are we actually using language that others might find off-putting? In terms of retention, I think this is really inextricably linked to the standard of coaching and performance management. So the most important thing is that we raise the bar in terms of how our people managers and our line leaders see themselves as managers of individuals, rather than a generic approach to performance management. And I often compare this to, how would I feel if I dropped either of my children off in the morning to school and actually felt that they were going to be treated in the exact same fashion as anybody else in the class, not recognizing that they are individuals with individual needs. So unless we can raise the bar in terms of awareness in general from our people managers, and awareness is the key thing, I think that's the most important thing in terms of retention. But one other thing I'll add, and I think it's something we need to be conscious of as we all start to tentatively return to the workplace, is the actual environment. We know that change is disruptive for all of us, but in particularly for people who are neurodiverse, you know, this could be a very, very difficult and challenging time. So we need to start looking at the work environment, how we encourage them back, the kind of layout, whether or not it's conducive, whether or not people need quieter areas, whether or not they prefer to be in a, you know, more boisterous open plan floor. So there are some of the things that people should consider.
Brilliant, thank you. I have a question for Louise just come up. So it says, how is the LEAP programme different to past ways that Focus Island advocacy team has worked with our customers, Louise? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I think the LEAP project is where we're being driven by our ambassadors rather than needing them. Before, we would always focus on customers' needs. We would ask them surveys, we would highlight them in the work we do. But this is a completely different thing where we're going back to the very basics. And you can see the work we did was really in depth, and it was quite traumatic, some of the work we were doing. And I think every session we all ended up in tears, that but we did really deep work and really came to what caused the initial trauma, what their pathway was, and we had supports built in. This was a completely different program, and we had supports built in. There was counselling available for them, there was support workers available for them, and there was actual help with guidance with Jeff Power, with different facilitators came into the workshop. So I think this was giving our ambassadors the tool to speak for themselves rather than asking them what they'd like us to say. They're going to speak for themselves and they have the tools and empowerment to do it.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Louise. I think I've got time for one final question, if that's okay. And that's for Teresa. And is there anything that you would have done differently over your career, Teresa?
Well, that's a good one. Is there anything I would have done differently? You know, I would have, is there anything I would have done differently? Probably not. You know, there were times when I've looked back and said, I regret. And then I actually realized that actually regret is a very wasteful sentiment, and that even the things that I could have done differently might have prevented me from having a learning opportunity. So no, I think we all have our story, and our story wouldn't be quite the same if we'd done something different. So
thank you. And I think we're about ready to wrap up. Just so that Scott knows, there is a huge amount of messages coming through, really congratulating you on one, telling your story, but also sharing your artwork. And I think you have some fans in the audience. So thank you for doing that. And I think really what comes through from everything that we've spoken about today is individuality, and recognizing that everybody is individuals. And when we do that and we allow people to either to talk about their individual experience, or to accept that, you know, people are individuals and they have individual needs, that actually we would lead to a much kind of richer environment that we are working and living in. So I suppose as we finish today, I'd like to thank Teresa Purtill, Louise Bayliss and Scott Buckley for joining us this afternoon and sharing your time and your insight. It is absolutely fantastic to hear from you and to hear your experiences, and to be able to ask you questions about them as well. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today for contributing your questions, and thank you for your continued support of the Women's Philanthropy Circle as well. If you're not a member, I'd encourage you to join and be part of something really very special. As we emerge from COVID-19 restrictions and head into the Christmas period, I think it's really clear that Focus Island services will be needed more than ever. We're already seeing an increase in the numbers of people seeking our help, and we are doing everything that we can to support them. So the team here will follow up with everybody that has attended. Please do take the opportunity to engage with them, ask them any questions that you might have, and organise to meet with them so you can get a better understanding of the difference that you can make. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Well, yes, it is just afternoon, and I hope you have a lovely remainder of the day, and thank you. Thanks to everybody.